Okay, we're live. Mr. Joe Greco, if you could take it away.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. I'll be filling in as chair of the committee today, as Mr. Rossi has other matters to attend to. So hopefully we get through this nice and quickly. I guess we'll get a motion for the minutes of the last meeting. We got Mr. Wayne Greco, who's put the motion. Do we have a second? Melinda? Okay.
Thank you.
Any other business, Michelle?
Mr. Chair, I've not been advised of any pecuniary interest. Does anyone wish to declare? Seeing none, I'll record none. Mr. Chair, I just want to let you know that Mr. Galazzi won't be attending today as well.
Okay.
One item for deferral, Mr. Chair, and if I could bring the committee's attention to tab 3 on your agenda. And that would be application A4121. Jill Kennedy and Daryl Sherlock are the applicants. The subject property is 294 4th Line West. The applicants have requested a deferral to October 20th in order to review correspondence submitted and discuss with the commenting staff.
Do we have a motion for deferral? Melinda? And Mr. Wayne Greco, would you want to second that? Yeah, we have a second.
And that would be till October 20th. Thank you very much.
Yep.
We can move back to item 1 on your agenda. And that would be an application for, and there's no representation in attendance. Application A3921, Jeremy Nadon and Stephen Fresh are the owners of 26 Summit Avenue. The subject property is designated residential in the official plan and is zoned R2 single detached. It's located on the northeast corner of Summit Avenue and Pym Street. The intent of the application is seeking relief from the provisions of bylaw 2005-150 as amended to legitimize the existing 3.72 meter by 15 meter shed by increasing the permitted height. Specifically, section 9.1.7D, maximum building height is 3.6 meters for an accessory building. They wish to increase the maximum building height to 4.45 meters for the existing shed only. Notice was sent by personal mail, by posting a sign on site, by posting on the city website. And I had no response from that circulation. Technical review as part of the application review. This proposal was circulated to internal departments and external agencies for their review. Building, planning, engineering services, legal department, fire services, and Sault Ste. Marie Region Conservation Authority had no objections. The Conservation Authority did advise that the area is under the jurisdiction of the Conservation Authority with regard to Ontario Regulation 17606, development interferes with wetlands and alterations to shoreline and water courses. Any development will require a permit by the Conservation Authority. Considerations for the committee are the shed was designed in such a manner to mimic the aesthetics of the existing home. And there are no objections to the request. And those are my submissions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Michelle.
Again, it's an increase to height from 3.6 meters to 4.45 meters. The shed exists. And we've had no feedback from building division or to the committee of adjustment on anybody offended with the shed.
Are there any comments from the committee members? Okay, it's less than a meter. Would somebody like to make a motion?
I'll move.
Melinda's moving.
Second.
Wayne's seconding. All in favor?
Thank you. Moving to tab 2 on your agenda, and Roxanne, this is your application. Could you please unmute Roxanne? The application is A4021. Roxanne Blay is the registered owner of 256 Birch Street. She is on the phone. The property is located on the south side of Birch Street between Morin Street and Walnut Street. The subject property is designated residential in the official plan and is zoned R2 single detached residential. Relief is requested from the provisions of bylaw 2005-150 as amended to permit 1 parking spot to be located in the required front yard and to legitimize the location of the 1.3 meter by 3 meter front deck addition. Specifically, sections 5.3.3A, no parking spaces shall be located in a required front yard. The applicant seeks to permit one parking space to be located in the required front yard. Section 4.2 permits a deck, steps, and landing to project 2.4 meters into the required front yard. The applicant seeks to permit the deck addition to project to within 2.5 meters of the front property line. Again, notice of public hearing was sent by personal mail to neighboring properties by posting a sign on site and posting on city website, and I have no feedback from the public. As part of the application review, this proposal was circulated to internal departments and external agencies for their review. Building, planning, engineering services, legal department, fire services, public works, and Sault Marine Conservation Authority had no objections. Building staff advised that a curb cut may be required and a building permit will be required for the altered landing and stairs. The applicant is aware of that. Conservation Authority advised that the area is not under their jurisdiction and they have no objections. Considerations for your review. For many years, it has been the practice of the property owners to access the garage in the rear yard via the easterly laneway. The homeowners have maintained that portion of the lane abutting their home. Recently, they were advised that they cannot use the lane for parking and must discontinue maintaining the lane during the winter months due to potential liability issues that are created where a city-owned property is involved. Creating a parking space in the required front yard is the only parking space option for the applicant, particularly during the winter months when access to the rear yard through the lane is not possible. Again, there are no objections to the request to date. And those are my submissions, Mr. Chair. And again, the property owner, Roxanne, is on the line if you have any questions.
Thank you, Michelle. Ms. Blade, do you have, Mr. Greco?
A question for Michelle under 4.2, if you can clarify for me. The bylaw requires deck and steps project 2.4 meters into the front yard.
In this case, and normally the application would read to allow it to project, say, 3 meters into the front yard.
Right.
However, in this case, the front yard is a legal non-conforming front yard setback. So it's too difficult to reduce it from 2.4, which they don't have in the first place, to what it is. So the committee's being asked to permit the deck to project to within 2.5 meters of the front property line.
Got it.
So when it can project 2.4 meters into the property, there's still front yard left. And sufficient front yard to meet the 25-foot setback. In this case, that's not the case. So we want an approval that shows exactly where the deck ends.
Thank you.
Ms. Blade, did you have any comments?
No, not at this time.
Melinda, any comments? No. Okay.
Sorry,
Anybody like-
Mr. Greco, I did submit some pictures just to, yes. And where the driveway would be on the other side.
Public Works and Traffic
Yeah.
is satisfied as well.
I was just showing that where that truck is that you were looking at there, it's just showing that that's the neighboring property. And you can see the red flag where my property line is. I had a plan of survey done, trying to make this all right. And anyway, where that property line is, you can see it midway on the truck. And that's the neighbor's property, and that's all I'm asking for is to be able to have the same kind of setbacks as they have. And on the other side as well, I took a snapshot, and it shows the same, the deck protruding the same, their deck protruding the same out as mine, and cars in their driveway that are past the property line.
Okay. It looks like there's some conditions to the members of the committee that we may place when you're making the motion. Would anybody like to make a motion? Mr. Greco?
Motion subject to the conditions.
And those conditions being curb cut may be required and a building permit to be required for the altered landing and the stairs. Would somebody like to second the motion?
Mr. Chair, if I could just clarify that, that's an advisement,
Okay,
not a condition. They will
Okay.
have to have a permit or building division will put a charge.
Right.
And the curb cut may be required, it may not. So it's just an advisement that that's something she could be looking at when she comes in to get her permit.
okay,
So again, I need a motion without those conditions.
okay. Mr. Greco, did you want to amend your motion?
Yes. How would you like me to phrase that then? Subject to the advisement?
No, just whether you approve the application that's before you or not.
Okay, so then we'll just leave it like that. Motion to approve the variance application. Does that satisfy the requirement?
Yep.
We have a second? Alinda? All in favor?
Thank you.
So that means I just have to get a permit for the deck at this point and ask about whether or not I need a curb.
Yes, but Roxanne, you'll get a written decision in the mail in the next few days.
Okay,
The decision that the committee made right now is subject to appeal for 20 days.
oh, okay,
So in 20 days, you can come in and get, you can find out what you need to do for your permit, but they won't
Okay.
issue the permit for 20 days.
okay,
And you will get a letter after that as well saying that there's been no appeal.
okay.
Okay?
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. Tab 3 has been deferred, so we'll move to tab 4. And Russ Wright is in attendance, and if you could unmute him, or is he muted himself? Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, tab 4, Colombo application.
Yes, that's,
Russ, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Thank you. We'll proceed with your request then. The application is A4221. The owners are Mario and Gina Colombo. The property is 575 Brule Road. It is located on the west side of Brule Road, north of 4th Line West. The subject property is designated rural in the official plan and is zoned R1 estate residential. Relief is requested from the provisions of bylaw 2005-150 as amended to facilitate the proposed construction of a 3.96 meter by 14.9 meter, being a 13-foot by 49-foot cabana, by reducing the rear yard and side yard requirements. Specifically, 9.5.3.1 requires a minimum other interior side yard of 3.5 meters. The applicants are requesting that the north interior side yard be reduced to 1.8 meters for the proposed cabana only. Section 9.5.2 requires a minimum rear yard of 10 meters. The applicants seek to reduce the rear yard requirement to 7 meters, again for the proposed cabana only. Notice of public hearing was sent by personal mail to neighboring properties by posting a sign on site and posting on the city website. I have no comments submitted from the public as a result of those notices. As part of the application review, this proposal was circulated to internal departments and external agencies for their review. Building, Engineering Services, Legal Department, Fire Services, and Sault Ste. Marie Conservation Authority had no objections. Building Division advised that the proposed development must comply with all applicable legislation, including obtaining a building permit prior to any construction commencing. Planning staff advised that the estate residential zone is the most restrictive residential zone, which provides for and regulates single detached dwellings. Lot regulations are intended to reflect a rural estate setting. That is to say, larger homes on larger lots with ample setbacks and open space. Planning staff do not believe that the proposed interior yard setback meets the intent and purpose of the R1 zone and therefore do not support this variance. However, staff would support an application to reduce the interior side yard from 3.5 meters to 2.6 meters for the proposed cabana. Staff do not object to the proposed rear yard reduction. In other words, staff do not object to the rear yard. Staff object to the side yard as requested, however, could support an amended request to 2.6 meters. Engineering staff advised that there is a drainage swale along the rear property protected by a drainage agreement that must not be affected by this construction. That's an advisement. Conservation advised that the area is not located in an area under their jurisdiction. Considerations, there are no objections to the rear yard setback to 7 meters. Again, planning staff do not support the variance to the side yard as requested. Planning staff would support a side yard reduction to 2.6 meters. And Russ Wright is on the line in support or as agent of the applicants. And those are my submissions, Mr. Chair.
Ms. Kelly, there were no public objections to the application, correct?
None, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Do any of the members have any questions for Mr. Wright?
My question would be in regards to the 2.6 that interior side yard that's planning staff is recommending. Is there any comment from Mr. Wright on that?
I share your question now, Wayne.
Thank you.
Mr. Wright?
Yes, sorry. We were just hoping to gain as much space in the backyard, usable space in the backyard as possible. We did speak to the neighbor who is directly adjacent to that property, and he had no objections to it being placed there. Just there's going to be a pool in the backyard, and they're just trying to make enough space so that it's all usable area around it, where it's not necessarily usable area between where the cabana or proposed cabana is going to be and the property line.
Okay. So the variance that we pass, one of the elements, it's got to be minor in nature. I don't know that that is minor in nature, considering the zoning and the intents of that zoning as legislated for, I guess. So if the 2.6 is the max you can go, I suppose, is that doable for you and your client? Because we do have a consideration when it comes to the zoning here, and it is a restrictive zone, and we have to follow that. Otherwise, we set a bad precedent.
Correct. I do understand where you're coming from and the precedents. Would it be possible? I guess anything really is, and they would be able to accept whatever the city is willing to go with. Just these properties here, they are an R1 zone, but also a true R1 zone is 45-meter frontage, where this property is just shy of 31 meters for the frontage.
Right.
So we are trying to maximize what our space is.
Right. So we're dealing
with.
I don't know if that bodes well. We got a smaller lot that we're trying to have comply with the zoning regulations of, I'll use the exact words, regulate single detached dwellings. Lot regulations are intended to reflect a rural estate setting, larger homes and larger lots with ample setbacks. So we have a larger home on a smaller lot, and we're trying to maintain those setbacks. I would make a motion that the 2.6 meters be followed as the city recommends. My fellow committee members, they can chirp in if they'd like, and I'm willing to hear them. But my motion would be to allow the variance to be 2.6 meters, not 1.8 meters, as recommended by the planning staff in this situation. So I'll motion that forward.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. I would support that motion. The city has adjusted both the side and the rear within a tolerance that's acceptable to the planning. So I would hate to see this deferred or delayed for that small amount.
I agree. I don't think, yep, go ahead, Melinda.
Oh, I was just gonna say, like, I don't have to go with, well, I am gonna go with this motion, but to add the drainage swale that makes sure that nothing is affected there. So.
Of course. Okay, Michelle, would you like me to rephrase my motion to include that?
Well, Mr. Chair, if I might, I think what the committee's going to do is refuse the application as presented
Okay,
and move a motion to amend the application to the reduction to the rear yard and a reduction to the north interior side yard to 2.6 meters.
okay. I'll put that motion forward then, Ms. Kelly, that we refuse the application and amend the application to have the north interior side yard reduced to 2.6 meters for the proposed cabana and reduce the rear yard to 7 meters for the proposed cabana.
Having said that, we don't need to add the drainage as a condition, but for comfort level for the committee, I can point it out at the end of your motion as a reminder and advisement.
Yes, please, Ms. Kelly.
We just need a vote.
Before, Mr. Chair, if I can, is that acceptable to Mr. Wright?
Yes, if that's the most the committee is willing to accept for a side yard setback, we will have to accept that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. So if I can have a second to the motion.
I will second.
Thank you, Mr. Greco. All in favor? Motion carries.
Moving forward to tab 5 on your agenda, and Carlo, are you still with us somewhere? You are, you're right there.
I am here. Hello.
This is application B2021.
Michelle, Mr. Wright, you can leave if you like, right, if you have no matters with us.
Oh, pardon me.
If you don't have any further matters with the committee, Mr. Wright, you can go if you like.
Sounds good.
Just don't want to
Thank
hang
you
you
very
up
much.
longer than you have to. No problem.
All right.
Sorry, Madam Treasurer.
No problem. The application is Kara Community Corporation. Carlos Spatafora is solicitor for the applicants. The application number is B2021. The civic addresses involved are 360 Northern Avenue East and 31 Old Garden River Road. It is located on the northeast corner of Northern Avenue East and Great Northern Road. The subject property is designated residential in the official plan and is zoned R4 with a special provision, medium density residential, and R5 with a special provision, high density residential, and is subject to site plan control. The applicant is seeking the committee's consent to sever a westerly, irregular shaped parcel being approximately 0.6 hectares or 1.5 acres in size, with frontages on Northern Avenue East and Old Garden River Road. The retained lands would be approximately 0.97 hectares or 2.41 acres in size and continue to contain the existing Kara 1 units. The intent of the consent is to facilitate the proposed construction of a 7-story, 58-unit apartment building and an 80-person place of worship within the same building and on the severed parcel. Notice of public hearing was issued by personal mail, posted on city website, and by posting a sign on site. As a result, David Pollock, a neighboring property owner, submitted the following comments. I am a neighbor located for the past 35 years directly across Northern Avenue from Holy Trinity Church, and as such, I'm keenly interested in any construction adjacent to my properties. The main areas of my concern are: 1, that enough green space is being provided for such a large apartment complex. 2, that the memorial garden is correctly moved. 3, sufficient tenant and visitor parking is being provided. Green space. It is my understanding from the first that there would be adequate green space for this new building complex, and the memorial garden would remain, and that is not shown on the current plot plan. A church building and a graveyard or memorial garden should stay together. It was also my understanding that the memorial garden would be staying as part of the required green space and that there would not be a parking lot in that area. In this memorial garden, the remains of 21 persons have been interred to a depth of 3 feet. Have the rules and regulations of the Bereavement Authority of Ontario been followed? Apparently not, as the lilac bush and plants are still there. Also, who oversees the moving of this memorial garden, which has to satisfy the rules set out by the BCO? Has the contractor been made aware of this garden? B, seeking an extension of time to finalize the severance to enable contact to be made to the families whose loved ones' remains are in the Holy Trinity Memorial Gardens. This would enable them to be made aware that their loved ones' remains are going to be paved over for a parking lot. It would also provide me time to gather more data from the Bereavement Authority of Ontario, the BOA. I am also requesting a review of the parking, as there are 89 required spaces and only 72 provided, which seems limited and may not allow for the influx of parking needed when there is a baptism, wedding, or funeral in the proposed ABC chapel. Is there a specific requirement for parking for this parking amenity? As part of the application review, this proposal was circulated to internal departments and external agencies for their review. Planning, engineering services, the legal department, fire services, PUC services, the Conservation Authority, Public Works, and Bell Canada right-of-way had no objections. Planning staff support the request. They understand that the CMHC's funding requirements compelled a reconfiguration of the property, which then necessitated the severance. The Holy Trinity Tower property and the adjacent Cara residential development will continue to function in association with each other. Ample parking and outdoor amenity space from the adjacent Cara development will be utilized by the Holy Trinity Tower development. They pointed out that council approved the parking arrangements, the proposed outdoor amenity space, and a reduction to landscape open space to 29% from the required 33%. Planning opined that this development will improve the existing frontage landscaping along Great Northern Road and Old Garden River Road. Engineering and Construction Division has reviewed the application and provides the following. Any shared servicing or servicing that crosses neighboring property should be covered in private easements and should be confirmed prior to final consent. A 3-meter road widening across the frontage is required if it has not already been taken, and it hasn't been taken yet, so that will form part of our conditions if this moves forward. PUC service advised that the 2 existing easements in favor of PUC need to be maintained. Conservation Authority advised that the area is not under their jurisdiction. However, they had no objections to the application. Considerations: save and accept Mr. Pollock's request to defer. There were no objections to the request. The proposed development received council support to rezone so that the project could proceed. Parking and green space are matters that have already been dealt with by council and as such are beyond the scope of this severance request. Conveyance of the road widening strip will change the shape of the previous consent, causing the properties to merge, thereby permitting the creation of a newly configured parcel. Cash in lieu for the proposed new lot creation is not required since no additional building lot is being created. The proposed reconfigured lot creation satisfies official plan policies and the zoning bylaw. Customary conditions for lot creation to be attached in a submission of this nature are transfer of deed, certificate application, reference plan, PIN abstract, discharge of mortgage if any, up-to-date tax report, and confirmation that easements in favor of PUC services are maintained. And those are my submissions, Mr. Chair. And again, Mr. Spatafora is here representing the applicants.
Thank you, Ms. Kelly. I guess we don't have that letter in our packages from Mr. Pollock, do we?
That's the letter in its entirety in my comments.
Okay. In your, oh. Is it in our package?
Yep. Right on the first page where it says David Pollock, a neighboring property owner, submitted the following comments.
Oh, I don't know if I've got that.
I don't have it.
Not in your package?
No.
Okay, sorry about that. I can repeat or I will address the main concerns in it. And he mentions green space. He's concerned about sufficient tenant and visitor parking being provided and that the memorial garden is correctly moved. The green space that he mentions and the sufficient tenant and visitor parking have already been addressed by council. That's not part of the committee's scope in this application. The memorial garden, Mr. Spatafora has some comments to make about that.
I was just going to say if we can have some comments there. I don't have any other questions sort of beside that, Mr. Spatafora.
Okay, just to explain and clarify with regards to that issue. To be clear, it's been called a cemetery, it's been called a memorial garden. I think that those are terms of common nomenclature. The reality is that this is actually known as a scatter garden. We won't get into the definition and details of what this is, but essentially, when you have something like the scatter garden, you do have to follow the guidelines and regulations of the Bereavement Authority of Ontario. The Bereavement Authority of Ontario essentially gives best practice, including how much soil you need to remove in a scatter garden. And that is based on the amount of use of the site, which in this particular case, it's been confirmed that it has long since not been used. So this is a very historical scatter garden that's been maintained. I can confirm to you that under the auspices and oversight of the Diocese of Algoma of the Anglican Church and the Archdeacon Harry Huskins, who actually sat on the council to create the Bereavement Authority of Ontario, those were the oversight entities with regards to the movement of the, I will use the concept of remains and the soil and some of the vegetation, and that's been moved over to the St. Luke's Columbarium, which I think, to echo my client's point, probably a more suitable location for this type of scatter garden and the remains of there. This was done. They followed the regulations, and that was done. I believe actually the timing would have been before this was brought to council for the rezoning application. So it's something that they've been cognizant of, but they have done what they've had to do in terms of regulation. And there is a list maintained at the columbarium as to names. So they've maintained that. There still is some vegetation that is at the spot there. But most of the vegetation has been moved to the columbarium and planted in the location there as well. That vegetation is not considered to be tied specifically to this. It's in the area of the scatter garden, but not part of the scatter garden is the best way to describe it. And there will be green space that is going to be where this scatter garden was, but there will no longer be a scatter garden. That's been moved.
Thank you, Mr. Spatafora. I think that's sufficient. Does anybody have any questions, any further questions for Mr. Spatafora? Can I have a motion?
Mr. Chair, before you move to a motion,
Yes.
in Mr. Pollock's comments,
Yes.
he asked that an extension to finalizing this consent be considered if you're not, and I presume that's if you're not satisfied with the information that Mr. Spatafora has provided to you, just to allow him time to have some information. But again, this was all at council, and Mr. Spatafora has provided you with an update on the scatter garden. I just want you to know that Mr. Pollock did ask for an extension, and if you're not satisfied, or if you're satisfied, there'll be no extension. And that's what I have to say.
Thank you, Ms. Kelly. I'll ask for a motion. I am satisfied, but I'll listen to the committee.
I'm also satisfied. I don't think an extension would change my mind on this. And I feel like Mr. Spatafora gave us a good description on everything that needed to be done, and they've done their due diligence, and council's already done their work and approved it and stuff. So I'm good, and I'm gonna motion, but with the conditions and the stuff set out with the official plan.
Okay, can I have a second?
Me too.
Mr. Greco, that's Wayne Greco and Melinda McGregor.
Yep.
All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Spatafora.
Thank you very much, and thanks to everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, Carl.
Bye now.
Don't go away far.
Oh,
I mean, you're on again in a few minutes with Patrick Street.
Oh,
Oh,
I guess
yes,
taking
of course. My apologies.
Okay, so we'll move to item tab 6 on your agenda. That's tab 6 and tab 7. And Hugh, this is the application that you're involved in if you're there. And we'll move forward. I told him I wasn't quite sure when it would come up, but so these two applications go tandem. I will require individual motions. However, I'll explain the applications. Application B2321 is an application from Jo Marie Phantom. She's the owner of 1367 Second Line West. It's located on the south side of Second Line West between Nixon Road and Lees Bay Road. The subject property is designated rural in the official plan and is owned R1 estate residential. Subject to final consent approval of the next application being B2521 because it's a mutual land exchange. The applicant is seeking the committee's consent to sever an easterly interior parcel being approximately 0.111 hectares in size. It's shown as part A on the diagram submitted, and attach it to civic number 1343 Second Line West as a lot addition, together with an easement for right-of-way purposes over a northerly portion of the subject property shown as part C on your plan in favor of civic number 1343 Second Line West. Further, consent is requested to an easement for right-of-way purposes along the westerly flank of the subject property shown as part B in favor of 1343 Second Line West because 1343 Second Line West owns the property to the rear. Both proposed easements would provide the owners of civic number 1343 Second Line West access to the proposed severed parcel and to their southerly property to the rear of civic number 1367 Second Line West. The intent of the application is to facilitate a mutual land exchange between civic number 1367 Second Line West and civic number 1343 Second Line West. As a result of the public notice by mail and city website and a sign on site, I had no response from the public. As part of the application review, this proposal was circulated to internal departments and external agencies for their review. Building, Planning, Engineering Services, the Legal Department, Fire Services, Conservation Authority, and Bell Canada Right-of-Way had no objections. Conservation Authority advised that the area is under the jurisdiction of the Conservation Authority with regard to Ontario Regulation 17606, development interference with wetlands and alterations to shoreline and water courses. Any development of the subject property, proposed severances or easements will require a permit by the Conservation Authority. Considerations for your review. There are no objections to the request. This request is part of a mutual land exchange. It is intended to address the septic system encroachment and formalize existing access egress issues by establishing dedicated right-of-ways. Cash anew for proposed new lot creation is not required since no additional lot is being created. The proposed conveyances satisfy official plan policies and the zoning bylaw. Customary conditions for lot creation to be attached, such as transfer deed of land, certificate application fee, reference plan, PIN abstract, discharge or partial discharge of mortgage, up-to-date tax report, and final consent of application B2125. Now, would you like me to go to the next application before you make a motion on either, or would you like to finish with this one?
I think we can do them all at once, Michelle, or let's do.
I'll go on to describe the next application then.
Yes.
And that was the application B2521.
Yeah.
Tip and Gary Bellarose are the owners of 1343 Second Line West. It is located on the south side of Second Line West between Nixon Road and Lees Bay Road. The subject property is designated rural in the official plan and is zoned R1 estate residential with a special exception. Subject to final consent approval of application B2321, which is the one that I just described, the applicants are seeking the committee's consent to sever a southerly interior parcel being approximately 0.310 hectares in size and shown as Part D on your plan, and attach it to the rear of civic number 1367 Second Line West as a lot addition. The intent of the application is to facilitate a mutual land exchange between civic 1343 Second Line West and civic 1367 Second Line West. And again, I had no result or comments from the public as a result of the public notice. As part of the application review, this proposal was circulated to internal departments and external agencies for their review. Building, Planning, Engineering Services, the Legal Department, Fire Services, Conservation Authority, Algoma Public Health, and Bell Canada Right-of-Way had no objections. Conservation Authority advised that the area is under the jurisdiction of the Conservation Authority. Any development of the subject property, proposed severances or easements will require a permit by the Conservation Authority. Considerations, there are no objections to the request. Again, this request is part of a mutual land exchange. It is intended to address septic system encroachment and formalize existing access egress issues by establishing dedicated rights of way. Cash in lieu for the proposed new lot is not required since no additional lot is being created. The proposed conveyances satisfy official plan policies and the zoning bylaw. Customary conditions for lot creation or lot addition are transfer deed of land, certificate application fee, reference plan, PIN abstract, discharge or partial discharge of mortgage, up-to-date tax report, final consent of application B2521. And those are my submissions. And Mr. Hugh McDonald is here as agent for this last application, the Bella Rose B2521.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Kelly. Mr. McDonald, before we do anything, Mr. McDonald, did you have any comments that you'd like to share with the committee?
I don't think so. If there's any questions about understanding how this originated or what the intentions were, it goes back quite a ways. The wife, Mr. Shoemaker's client, Ms. Fantham, prior to his death, her husband and the male party of the applicants, Tim Belrose, had essentially an agreement that they would go through this exercise of trying to take, say, part A that you'll see up in the upper right hand of Mr. Urso's plan. That would be more or less swapped for the part down below, part D, where there had been some encroachments and land use by the Fantham family on that block that belongs to my client, whose actual residence is up in the northeast corner, closer to the hillside dropping off onto second line there. So they had some other issues about legalizing what had been a longstanding driveway over part C in the upper left side. And to try to have a more orderly access to the rear, because there's quite a bit of property to the south of what you're looking at on the plan. That belongs also to my client. And it's very difficult to access along this hillside that doesn't really appear on the map, but most of the property east of where Mr. Urso's put part A, E, and D, that is a hillside dropping down towards Nixon Road. And it's not really very easy to get around with a vehicle or tractor or anything. So that was what got this plan going. It bogged down for quite a while, and then Mr. Shoemaker, who I think was planning on attending, speak to his matter. He and I worked out some fairly detailed terms about this, and the severance and the two severances were scheduled to be heard together for the obvious reason that we are having to sever part D to the south to give to him, and his client, Ms. Fantham, is severing the A piece as a lot addition to part F, the mainlands. They're severing an easement in perpetuity over C, which is the piece coming in and coming over to A that's currently part of Ms. Fantham's land. She's retaining E entitled to part C, but the easement will go to my people. And then along the west boundary, you'll see that there's a corridor that's going to be transferred to my client, and that will allow him more orderly access down through here. Down through from north to south along the west boundary. So the fairly comprehensive agreement goes with this in terms of who can do what.
Yep.
And essentially that's all I thought is might be worth explaining in addition to what Ms. Kelly has said.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald. You can see a lot of work has gone into this by you and Mr. Shoemaker, so we commend that. Are there any comments from the committee? No comments. Can I have a motion on? We'll do the application B2321-260 first. That's Joe Marie Phantom. Can we have a motion on that? Yeah, Mr. Wayne Greco.
The motion to approve.
Can a motion to approve with the conditions, Mr. Greco?
Yes, thank you.
Can we have a second, please? Melinda McGregor, all in favor? Motion passes. Ms. Kelly, we'll go right to the next application then, because we've already heard it.
Yes,
Okay, application B25/21-260. Tim and Carrie Bellerose. Can I have a motion for the application?
I will motion with the conditions as well. I think there's, or is
I'll
there
second.
conditions on that one?
Yes, there were some conditions on there. Michelle read those into the record. We have Melinda who motioned with the conditions and Wayne Greco second. All in favor? Thank you. The motion carries. Thank you, Mr. McDonald.
Yeah, thank you, members and Michelle for all your help. Appreciate it. I'd like to leave the meeting if that's all right.
Absolutely.
Okay, everyone take care.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald. Steele.
Mr. Chair, before we move on to the next matter,
Yes.
I see Jill Kennedy is on board by muted, but on board. Jill, we've dealt with your application and deferred it to October 20th. You're more than welcome to stay tuned into the hearing, but I just wanted to let you know that your application was dealt with at the beginning of the hearing.
Okay, thank you for confirming.
Okay, take care.
You too. Bye.
Bye. Hey, Mr. Chair and Mr. Spadafora, you're back on board. Are you there? Yeah.
Yep, he's there.
Sorry about that.
No problem. Moving on to tab 8. That would be application B2621, and Carlos Spadafora is acting agent for the applicants. I should just mention that the 1890685 Ontario is Ruscio. I should have maybe pointed that out earlier. If anyone wishes to declare a conflict, now's the time. Nope, okay. The subject property involves several properties, 325, 333, 341, and 357 Patrick Street. They are located on the west side of Patrick Street, approximately 55 meters south of Patrick Street and Henrietta Avenue intersection. The subject property is designated residential in the official plan and is zoned R3 low density residential. The applicant is seeking the committee's consent to sever a 0.3 meter strip across the rear of each of the 4 properties and attach them to the easterly abutting property known as Civic number 349 Patrick Street as a lot addition. The intent of the application is to change the shape of the 4 above noted properties so that these lots can be realigned for future development considerations. Notice of public hearing was issued by personal mail, posting on the city website and posting a sign on site. I had no written correspondence submitted. I did have a few phone calls just to further explain the application. As part of the application review, this proposal was circulated to internal departments and external agencies for their review. Building, planning, engineering services, the legal department, fire services, and conservation authority had no objections. Engineering and construction division has reviewed the application and provided the following. There is an existing drainage agreement that covers the swale along the rear property line of these properties. The ownership confirmed that the swales will not be impacted and that the agreement does not need to be revised due to the change in design. Conservation Authority advised that the area is not under the jurisdiction of the Conservation Authority with regard to Ontario Regulation 17606 development interference with wetlands and alterations to shoreline and water courses. Considerations are there are no objections to the request. This request is intended to undo the shape of the previously consents under which these parcels were created so that new lot configurations could be considered in the future. Cash in lieu for the proposed new lot creation is not required since no additional lots are being created. The proposed conveyances satisfy official plan policies and the zoning bylaw. Customary conditions would be transfer deed of lands, certificate application fee, reference plan, PIN abstract, discharge or partial discharge of mortgage, up-to-date tax report. I would also suggest that you may want to add as a condition that engineering construction of the director of engineering construction or his designate be satisfied with regard to the drainage swale and that, and I would word it in such a manner as the onus would fall back on them to confirm with the applicants that nothing will be hindered. And those are my submissions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Kelly. This seems pretty straightforward. I don't have any questions. Do any of the members have any questions for Mr. Spatafora? Mr. Spatafora, do you have any comments that you'd like to share with the committee?
Nothing to really bring into light that'll change anything. This is a really I'll call it a Planning Act housekeeping matter.
I assume your clients know about the drainage issues.
Yes.
There are potential issues. They're willing to deal with that.
Absolutely, I can confirm that, and they own the back piece, so it'll work out.
Perfect. Can I have a motion, Wayne?
A motion to approve subject to the condition identified.
Would you like to add the and that the director of engineering or his designate be satisfied with the drainage agreement?
Sounds good to me.
Perfect. Thank you. Can I have a second to that motion? Melinda, all in favor? Motion carried. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Spatafora.
Perfect. Thanks very much. I'm good now, Michelle. I can.
Yes, that's the end of, as a matter of fact, that's the end of our matters today.
Thanks,
See if we can
everybody.
find a tie.
That's right. Okay, thanks. I'll try. Bye.
Bye, Joe.
Wait, yeah, stop.
That's all the matters then, Ms. Kelly?